Welcome to another edition of the McAnulty Method, where financial expert Frank McAnulty shares his knowledge and insights with us so that we might live a little bit better financial life. Frank, thank you for joining us.
Bill, good to be here.
I want to say we're very close to the 4th of July, so I appreciate your fireworks in the background there.
Yeah, I gotta, try to celebrate even though we can't have fireworks like that here in California, personally, we got to show some festivity.
That's right. Well, and actually, our topic today ties in well with the 4th of July, because as I recall, the Declaration of Independence included a clause in there about when they were talking about the inalienable rights of men. One of them was, and women, although they didn't mention them. One of them was the right to pursue and own property. And today we wanted to talk about whether or not that's a smart idea. Should you buy a house or should you rent? So Frank, tell us.
Well, Bill, like with all things, it depends on the person, the circumstances, the timing. Is it in general a good idea to own real estate in this country? Yes. Due to most areas have zoning laws, it makes it more restrictive to build, harder and harder to build, more and more expensive to build. Property tends to go up most of the time. We can all, say, well, in Detroit it went down, and this place it went down, and here it went down. You're right. There's always an exception to the rule. But for the most part, real estate's going to go up.
That's, it seems like in some of our previous editions, you've talked about how owning a house or owning property it's kind of like having the ultimate piggy bank. It just keeps growing without you having to do much about it. Do I have that right?
Yes. It's, you get to buy the house on leverage, or the house, the condo, whatever, on leverage. So real quick, simple example. I always like to keep the numbers as simple as possible. But if you bought a house with the standard 20% down, and I guess I'll use California numbers rather than it. You bought a house for $1 million, and you put $200,000 down. Okay. We won't talk about the payment right now, but if that house went up in the next year 5% in value, so that means it went from $1 million to $1.05 million in value in a year. That means you just earned $50,000 on your $200,000 down payment. So you just made 25% on your down payment. And you had a place to live at the same time. So in many ways, it is the greatest way to build wealth in this country. In my mind, that's also very safe for the most part. Sure. You're going to buy a house. The best way to do real estate, to buy real estate, is buy where you'd want to live. Not where you wish you could live. Sure, we'd all like to live in the Hollywood Hills or something, $5 million house with a view of downtown LA or the ocean or whatever. Great. But a house where you really want to live because other people will want to live there. So, and we're talking today about not investment property as much, but where you're going to live. So, and we've spent the first few minutes here just talking about buying. I think we need to discuss the difference between buying versus renting. Because let's face it, the audience we're talking to, the younger crowd, most of you don't have, in my example, $200,000 to put down on your house just yet.
Most of the people I know don't either. So there we go.
And so, do you want to buy a house? Probably. Should you buy a house? Let's talk about that a little bit. because there are different circumstances that indicate maybe now's not a good time to buy a house for you.
All right. Do you want to run down what some of those circumstances might be for us?
Well, if you don't know where your job's going to have you working for the next few years, it's expensive. So let's go back to my example. It's expensive to move. It's expensive to buy a house. It's expensive to sell a house. And I'd hate for somebody to say, well, I have the money to buy this house. I don't know where I'm going to be working in a year. My job's talked about transferring me in that. So let's just look at my example. You bought the $1 million house. You put $200,000 down. You got 5% appreciation. You go to sell it, and it costs you 6% realtor fees.
Uh-oh.
So you just lost all your appreciation, and you had to pay more money. So if you're unclear as to how long you can be in the property, it might be a good idea to rent.
That is one of the real benefits. It's much easier to move if you're renting.
Right. It's expensive. Owning a house is expensive. Let's face it. There's always something that needs to be done to a house.
And one more check for the renting side of it. If something needs to be done around your apartment, you call the manager and say, hey, my sink is stopped up. Fix it.
And you're exactly right. And that's why some people would much rather rent. And so not every decision is 100% financial. What do you feel most comfortable with? You just don't want to deal with a home. You don't want to worry about the landscaping. You don't want to worry about the plumbing. You don't want to worry about any of that. You're working 60, 70 hours a week. You want to be able to come home, something's fixed, you call somebody, something's broke, you call somebody, it gets fixed. Great. Then you're probably right. You're probably better off renting.
I remember when many years ago when I was kind of young, and my wife and I were talking about it, and she said, there's a house for sale, and we can actually afford it. And we went to look at it, and we realized we could afford it, but we didn't want to live there. So,
well,
in fact, you're going to try and buy where you would like to live.
Well, you have to try to buy where you want to live because you're going to be there a long time. As there's all this talk about there being a real estate bubble right now. And I can show you articles that says there is. I can show you articles that says there's not a real estate bubble. So the key is most real estate bubbles don't last more than 7 years. You can see through history that, yes, if you're the lucky person that buys that $1 million house and the market crashes tomorrow, and over the next 2 to 3 years, the value goes down by 30%, 40%, whatever, you're going to be okay. As long as you bought a house you can afford, and no one should ever use an adjustable mortgage at this point in time. With interest rates as low as they are, if you can't buy your house with a fixed rate mortgage, you can't afford the house. Really that simple. You shouldn't do it. But so say the prices go down for 3 years. I think in the 2009 mortgage crisis, they went down for about 3 years or so before they hit bottom. And now look, what are we? We're 12 years out now, but prices are, I don't know, 30, 40, 50% higher than they were before they crashed in 2009.
Oh, yeah.
And so time is always your friend. And so, but once again, like you said, Bill, if you didn't want to be there in that area, 12 years in a house where you really didn't want to live is that's a pretty good prison sentence. But you got to stay there because you got to protect your equity. So, let's face it. Right now, especially with the way prices are. People can't afford houses right off the bat. Well, maybe you buy a condo. You know, one of the first pieces of property I bought was a condo. And I bought it with my brother, 50-50. You know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. We bought that. It had a 16.5% mortgage, because that was the good mortgage rates back then, not a 3.5% mortgage. But we wanted to get in and start building equity. That's the key, because you can use that equity then to sell it and keep moving up to where you really want to be eventually. Don't just think, oh, houses are too expensive. I'll never get one. No, you may not get what you want today, but eventually you can if you take the intermediate steps.
No, and a townhouse or a condo is it's where we started. You know, my wife and I, we got a condo, and we were thrilled with it, and you know, it provided that equity and the ability to then take the next step and get an actual house.
Right. And we both started in apartments before that, right?
Oh yeah.
Right? We had apartments. I'm sure some of them weren't where you wanted to live.
No, I had a place in when I was in college. I shared a place with 3 other guys, and it was $120 a month, which meant we were each paying $1 a day. But believe me, as cheap as that sounds, we were still paying a little too much for the place we had. I'm telling you.
Yeah, on the one hand, you just made a lot of people cry over how cheap rents used to be. But of course, minimum wage was also $1.
That's right.
So renting from a standpoint, renting also isn't a bad idea. If, say, you move to a new area, and even if you have money to buy a house, sometimes it's a good idea to rent a place for 6 months to a year to find out, you know, is this the neighborhood I want to be in? Is this, you know, the right school district? Is this, you know, is it convenient? Are my neighbor, you know, just, you know, you don't know. You've moved into a new neighborhood, new area, new neighborhood, new state. Just running in and immediately buying a house may not be the best idea.
Right.
You know, say, oh, I'll miss out on appreciation. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, you can offset that by the you're saving on taxes.
Right. Or you're saving on mental anguish if you buy a house in the wrong place.
Yeah.
You know, it's so renting has its place. You know, I'm a big believer in owning. I think you are too. I think in the long run, you know, and we're always talking this little series of talks, we're always talking about the long run and how you build equity, how you build your wealth. Owning is much better, because say you buy a house and you live there for 30 years. In 30 years, it's paid for. You no longer have a house payment. Or you've used the equity you build up to borrow against your house and buy further rental properties. And you become the landlord and let the renters pay off your property. Because really, as a renter, you're making the landlord rich. You're doing nothing to make yourself rich, and you're making the landlord rich, because they're the person that said, oh, if I buy this property and I have tenants in it for 30 years that pay the mortgage, when I get closer to retirement, I'll have a fully paid for piece of property that is part of my retirement plan.
Yes, and the one thing about renting too is that rents rarely seem to go down.
No, No, I think they may have gone down back in 2009, but then so did housing prices.
Mhm.
Yeah, rents rents are going up a lot. I don't know. I haven't seen a study as if they're going up faster than housing prices, but they're going up rather drastically. And yes, is it a stretch to get into a house a lot of times? Yes. Do you maybe have to ask your parents for help? Yes. Do you have to bring in maybe a partner to buy a house to start with? Yes. Now, if you do that, if you buy a house with a friend, a girlfriend, boyfriend, somebody you're not married to, you can blame it on me, but you get a written agreement as to what's going to happen to that house because you don't know. I mean, even if you're married, you don't know, but you have to make sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to this. Is a huge investment. It's a huge undertaking. And so maybe, you go into it with partners and say, okay, every year we will vote whether we're keeping the house another year or selling it. You have an agreement that says if the other partners wish to sell, here, whoever doesn't has the right to buy it from them at an appraised value. You get, go out and get two appraisals and average them and decide that's the price that you get. This is a business transaction now. And where people get in trouble is they think, oh, they're my friend. I've known them forever. This is wonderful. Nothing, what could ever go wrong? Trust me. You're right. They're your friends. Nothing would ever go wrong until you're talking about money.
Yeah, there you go. That might be an interesting topic for a whole session sometime, because I remember that well from it was like a class I was actually appearing on as a speaker, but on the more creative side. But one guy was explaining like deals in movies and stuff. He said no matter what everybody's agreed to, when the money hits the table, everything changes. And even if you're dealing with friends, that tends to be the case.
Unfortunately, that's true, and it's the case when dealing with friends. That a lot of times it's even uglier when dealing with family.
Oh yeah,
because then everything from when you were 5 years old comes up. Mom liked you best. Oh. So yeah. So I think we sort of rambled a little bit today, but
we've gotten far away about whether we should buy or rent, and as you said, it kind of comes down to your situation.
It does, but I think the bottom line is you should buy as soon as absolutely possible, given your situation, given your circumstances.
All right.
Because it's going to work out well for you in the long run. 99% of the time. I firmly believe that. I think we've proven that in most of the country with that.
All right, then. I think that's a good place to end it. We can still get out and maybe look at a few houses before dinner.
Well, as I told you earlier, I've been doing that half the day with my sister-in-law who's looking to buy a house in North Carolina. And I tell you, look, everybody knows right now, if you're looking for a house, it's crazy. Trying to buy something. You told me just before we came on air that somebody that's been trying to buy a house for a year back east, and that's a common story. The only thing I can say is all the articles I've been reading, everything I've been seeing, seems to indicate that this is going to slow down. Doesn't seem to say that there's going to be a crash, but it seems to say it's slowing down. So if you're looking for a house, and you're desperate to buy a house, my advice would be don't stretch. Wait till the winter. Wait till the depths of winter when it's the worst time to sell a house, and look then. Of course, if prices go up 30% between now and then, don't yell at me. I've been wrong before, I'll be wrong again. But the worst thing you can do is become, in many ways, house poor.
Oh, yeah.
Because in the least little financial difficulty, and you could lose your house.
All right. Well, it's a somber note, but
Yeah.
I think we'll call it there, Frank. Thank you very much, and we'll take it to heart.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
See you next time.
Bye.